Hi everyone, my name is Felicia Bacon. I'm a student at law school, and today I have with me Karis Tobias. She is a student at law school, and she's going to be sitting with me, talking with me about her journey to and through law school. And I'm so excited to learn more about her. I've seen her around through law school. She's written a few articles for law school and some comics too. And I just know she's super awesome, super talented. And yeah, I'm just excited to do this today. Hi, Karis, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so my first question is, where are you from and what were you doing before law school?
Okay, so I am from Australia and more specifically Western Australia. And what I did before launch school was I was a building designer. It's kind of like an architect, or pretty much the job of what an architect would do. Yeah.
I know from before you told me that, so you went to architecture school and you're a designer before. We have that similar background. We both came from an architecture background into software engineering, which I think is so interesting.
It is interesting. I believe that it's not, I don't know about you, but I don't think that architecture is all that different in terms of processes compared to how we would solve a problem in programming, for example, or how we would write code. There are a lot of crossovers and a lot of soft skills that can be definitely applied to programming for sure.
I think
Yeah.
so. So how long were you in architecture?
So I studied for 3 years, actually no, I studied for 2 years in a tech college, and then I studied for 3 years to get my undergrad degree. In Australia, you need to get 5 years. So I didn't do my last two. I'm still thinking about it. But in the meantime, I worked as a building designer for my dad, who was a builder.
I guess that's where we differ. Mine was just purely education. I had only went to school for it, and I never actually got to work as a designer, as an architect, which is something I had wanted, but I didn't get to do. But that's so amazing that you actually got to have like hands-on experience and do things and study what you loved doing. So that's amazing. Well, then, how did you get into the software engineering field?
Well, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a story, but basically, what had happened was during my time, I was thinking about changing careers, leaving. It kind of had run its course by then. I enjoyed it in the beginning, but after a while, it just wasn't what I thought it would be, and I just thought would it be a good time to make my way out. However, as I was about to, my poor dad, he had a big stroke, and what that meant was that he barely made it through, but he is very, very different now, and he's not able to talk. But what that meant was that we had to close his business down, which meant that I lost my job at the same time. So it was very difficult. And that happened during the pandemic. So the pandemic had just started. I was feeling down, but then I realized that everyone else was as well. And it was an opportune time where I then thought to myself, do I want to continue down this path of doing building design? Do I want to go and get my master's in architecture and be an architect? There were so many questions ahead of me. But the government, fortunately, was pushing that you can get a new career, you can retrain in something. And that definitely got me thinking about something that I had started about 10 years ago, but I never really continued, which was programming. I had an interest in web design. I could have gone a fork in the road in terms of going into architecture or going into programming 10 years ago, but I thought, well, why not have a look at it now? And I looked online and I found some courses, and they were approachable. They were definitely great to get your feet wet. But as I progressed through them, I just found that they were missing many things that I thought, like, they were very tutorial based and missing lots of fundamentals. And so I started peeking around the internet and just finding out how to solve problems in programming. And that's when I found Launch School.
I hear that story a lot. A lot of people come from different backgrounds, but usually I hear of people finding law school kind of in that way. They start they're interested in coding and wanting to learn how to program, and then they start dabbling in a bunch of different things that they find randomly on the internet until they just find Launch School and they're like, oh, I like this, and they stick with it. Do you remember exactly how you found Launch School?
Yeah, so again, I was in this particular course. It didn't give me all that I needed. And I remember typing into Google, like how to solve problems in, I think it was Ruby, or how to solve problems, programming problems. And I did find an article. It was a Medium article about Launch School. And I do believe, pretty sure that the founder, Chris Lee, wrote it. And it was detailing so many great things. And I was just like, oh, why didn't I know this yet? And so there was a link to Launch School at the bottom of the article. And then when I read the pedagogy and I read like all the stuff, all of that detailed what Launch School is, I was just like, I have to do this. I have to cancel what I'm doing now. And I have to do Launch School. It was just exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, I had kind of the same experience, just kind of finding it through an article. I didn't really search for it. It just kind of happened to be there when I saw it in my newsfeed. But yeah, I had the same kind of experience when I was reading about Launch School and reading the pedagogy, like you said, and the different pages. And I thought, like, this is it. This is the thing that I am missing, because that was what I felt was missing. I mean, we do a bunch of random resources online to learn how to code, and at no point can we ever put it all together. At no point do you feel like you have all the pieces together and you like fully, completely understand what you're learning. And so I think Launch School does a really good job of doing that for you. And it's so good and so comprehensive that you don't need anything else.
I fully agree. And, you know, no disrespect to other courses out there. It's just that sometimes tutorials don't actually give you the building blocks. It just tells you like a path A to a path B, but then you only understand that one instance, that one example of how to solve that one problem. And it doesn't really give you the elements of how to actually put new design and new code together, to string sentences of code together. So that's what Launch School definitely does for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, I don't think anyone really thinks about that aspect of programming when they are learning how to program, or when they learn how to code. They just say, oh, I want to learn how to code. And then I guess we think, find a language that I can code in, and that's it. Like, we don't realize there's hundreds of problems that you're going to be trying to solve in your career, and you have to learn how to be a really good problem solver. So that's not something I ever found or was trained on before I found Launch School.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is, which track did you choose and why did you choose it?
Sure. So I chose the Ruby track. And the main reason was, so the previous course that I was doing had Ruby in it, but that wasn't the main reason. So when I read the pedagogy and the material about learning the fundamentals and mastering the fundamentals, the main thing that I wanted was exposure to two languages taught by Launch School. And that's because just I really wanted to deeply understand. And I thought that if I had learned one language, that would be fine. But I just wanted that deeper understanding under the guidance of Launch School. So I decided to go the Ruby track. Yeah.
Yeah, if I had to do the Ruby track again, I would totally do it. Like, if I had to restart Launch School, because I like the idea of being able to walk away and say, I mastered two languages. And if I could learn like more languages like the Launch School way, I would totally love to do that. I think it's such a huge benefit, because Ruby and JavaScript, like, there are some similarities, I guess, but they're two vastly different languages. And I think it's good for a programmer to be exposed to different ways of doing things. Like, JavaScript's just been around for so long and it's really widely used. I think Ruby makes things easier for the programmer when you start to learn how to program. It's a beautiful language. The syntax is easy to pick up and easy to learn. The concepts, some of the concepts like variables as pointers and scopes might be confusing, but once you have it down with the first language, going to another language is made so much easier with that one. And so I think it's really good. Like, if people who are thinking about joining Launch School, they don't know which track to choose. I kind of am biased because I've done the Ruby track, but I would say that doing the Ruby track, sure, it might take a little longer, but I think it's better. I think the benefits outweigh the cons of it because you get to learn two whole languages, not just fundamentals, but object-oriented programming in both languages, in addition to everything else. And so you have more experience with the second language compared to, say, just learning one language. That might look good for interviews or your resume or your employer saying, oh, this person knows these two languages really, really well. I'm pretty sure they could pick up any tool or technology or language that we have for them too. That's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. It's just, it's such a great point. Walking away with two languages and being able to show that to prospective employers that they can it definitely shows that you are able to take on more.
Have you ever had that experience where you're like working on a programming problem, say one that you did at law school in Ruby, and then you see that problem again and you write the solution in JavaScript and you like compare and you say, I could do this problem in Ruby and in JavaScript, and you could see like the similarities and differences in code? Has that ever happened to you?
Well, to be honest, I have forgotten so much of Ruby, which is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. But I know what you mean. So when I first started, I was just like, I know how to do that in Ruby. How do I now do this in JavaScript? And just thinking about the methods and stuff. But now I can actually make those comparisons like, oh, yes. So, you know, you've got do and end in Ruby, and then you've got braces in JavaScript. But there is many similarities that cross over. And it is a wonderful thing where you can make that comparison. And then you think to yourself like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling. And it's kind of a problem too, really quick, when I'm solving a problem in JavaScript and I accidentally write Ruby code with it, and then I run it and I'm like shocked that I have errors. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I don't think I made any mistakes. And it's like, I accidentally write a do, or I write some kind of syntax in Ruby. That's happened so many times. And it's kind of annoying, but also kind of funny. Like the language is still there in my mind, even when I'm not thinking about it. It's like that ingrained, which is crazy to me.
No, that's just a testament to that you just deeply know the fundamentals, which is awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your favorite part about being at launch school?
My favorite part, there is a couple of things that come to mind. I will say that the people, although being in Australian time zone and launch school being primarily a American-based program, so the time zones are a little bit out. I don't always meet people, but whenever I do, they are just wonderful. And that includes the staff. The staff have been amazing, just great support, and just you get that feeling that even when you're at an interview or you've taken an assessment, that they really have your back. They just want to help you. And the handful of people that I've met and studied with over launch school have just been so supportive and encouraging and just want to help. And the community, I can't say enough about. It's just, they're so great. And the other thing is programming in general. So whenever and it can get frustrating at times, but there are times where when you get something, when you finally understand a concept or you solve a problem, it's such a great feeling. It is, it is that gestalt, that aha, yes, I've got it. And it's now forever in your mind or in your memory, and is just wonderful. You feel really accomplished. You feel just so good about yourself. It's so validating. That's the other great thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's that rewarding feeling after you've spent so long, struggling through a problem or a concept and you finally get it. Like that is just the best feeling in the world. And yeah, I agree with the community. The community is the thing that kept me going when I almost quit launch school. You probably heard the story of my first Ruby interview, and I came this close to quitting. But the people that spent time with me, encouraging me and helping me solve problems, if it weren't for them, I probably wouldn't still be here. And so, yes, I agree. The community is amazing here, if anything. So you're saying about launch school, don't think that just because it's an online school, you have to go through it alone, by yourself, studying every single day. It's totally not like that. And if you're able to, you can join the community, join any groups, because there's people all around the world. Like you're in Australia. And so you will find somebody who has the time to spend studying with you. So it can be challenging to coordinate with people and find time, especially when they have families, kids, and jobs and stuff. But it is doable. A lot of people here are flexible. So
Yes. I particularly will say the interviews for when you're going to take an interview, I've never had a time where that was inconvenient. The staff have just been great. They're just like, whatever time suits you, we will work to fit your time, and it has been very good, very, very good.
So my next question I'm really interested to hear is, what don't you like or not enjoy about being at law school?
So it's both. It can be bad at times, is that being in Australia, and like I said before, being a launch school, being a primarily American-based school, there is very few people that I can often talk to and study with, or are able to accommodate and help work with me in my time zone. So it can be very isolating at times. Majority of my time here at launch school, I have worked alone, and that can be difficult at times. It's very difficult to be able to, you don't always get to bounce ideas off each other and study and come up with questions and things like that. So that's been challenging, I will say. The other thing is that I believe launch school is a fantastic program. I do believe it is written for a particular kind of person that is very linear, that loves to read, that loves to solve things from start to finish in a very logical fashion, and that loves the details first and the big picture right at the end. I've noticed that as a particular pattern every time that I do a course and go through the material. Having said that, for somebody like me, I am the reverse. So I love the big picture stuff first, and then we drill down into details right at the end. That's more commonly a trait of a visual learner. And so I find that I have to process the material backwards. It means that I'll read the summaries first to get the gist of what I'm about to consume, and then I'll get into the material much later. I also find that there's not a great deal of pictures and examples and diagrams and metaphors, things to kind of connect my brain or connect my understanding to real world scenarios that makes me understand, because these are very abstract concepts that we're getting our head around, and it's not always can be explained through code. Sometimes to help us along for those non-tech people, yeah, I often have to find out, do my own research and find metaphors, find other definitions. It's sometimes I love launch school, and the material, content is excellent. This is sometimes, for me, it can be difficult to process, to comprehend. Yeah.
I totally agree. And
yeah, have you found that?
yes, actually, now that you're saying it, I guess I didn't realize that I'm the same way. Because when I get to a course, like I just started 225 a few weeks ago, I can't jump into something so incredibly specific and understand it. And so what I do is go through all the courses, not quickly, but kind of just blanket over everything, just to kind of get a general idea of what's there, and do the quizzes as best as I can. And then I get to the study guide. And so at that point, I've seen everything that there is to see, and I have a general context, if you will, of everything that I have to know. And once I have that, then I can say, okay, here's the study guide. I have to learn execution context. I can go specifically to that and really master that and do that for every single thing. And I didn't notice that that's how I learn. And I guess maybe I could say I'm a visual learner too, because I'm always trying to create diagrams and have visual things that can help me. Like, for example, I'm dealing with the global object and function execution context. And I thought, I mean, you could read it all day long and code it. But for me, I said I needed something more, something kind of in the world or in reality that could help me form this idea in my mind. And so I thought of, it's going to sound silly, but it makes sense to me. And I hope that I have this right. But I thought of like the global object as Earth, right? And then my house as an object. And I could be like a method in my house. So my execution context would be house, wouldn't be my house. But say I were outside of my house, I would be a function, and my execution context would be the global object, would be Earth. That is my context. And so it's not where I'm defined, it's where I'm executing myself in the code, in the program type thing. So I hope I have that mental model right.
That metaphor is awesome. Consider that stolen. It's awesome. What a great way to understand that. And especially it being global object, that makes so much sense of being the Earth. And being able to relate it to like concrete things that you and I impact or go through every day. That is just brilliant. What a great idea.
Thank you. And thanks. Yeah, I had this idea. And so that's how I've been thinking about it. I can't draw that. I've been trying to draw that with like stick figures and stuff, and it doesn't look good. But I was gonna ask you actually if maybe you would like draw something.
I would love to. I would love to. That is a great metaphor. And I think more people need to hear that in terms of just really wrapping your head around function execution context.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, see, and that's just like one example. I guess going through launch school, you can't really just memorize words. You have to take a concept and be able to deconstruct it and put it into your own words, have your own examples, and know it through and through like the back of your hand. And so when we create our examples, that's what I try to do. I try to create this like visual form or shape in my head of what this thing is. And it's been honestly really difficult with object-oriented JavaScript. There's lots of concepts and stuff. And so I would say that is probably the most difficult part I'm having too, is not having diagrams or pictures that kind of show how these concepts, how they look, I guess, in a visual way. Maybe you could help with that. Maybe you can draw some
Absolutely. I would love to. And I will say that I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but I have found being a visual learner, and because Launch School, the way that the course is laid out is primarily for somebody like another type of person that isn't a visual learner per se, that for visual learners, it will take double the amount of time because we'll have to convert the text into metaphors and to break it down more and more, whereas somebody that's more linear or more logical minded may go through the course very easily and find it very, very quick. So visual learners, it may take longer to understand the material. But it doesn't mean that you can't. It just takes longer.
Yeah, like I even have this like roll of paper. I'll show you really quick. I just bought this actually for this class. It's, I don't know if you can see it. It's this roll of like brown paper.
Oh yes.
So what I do, and this is what I did for my first Ruby assessment. I had this brown roll of paper and I would fill it up with drawings and diagrams and like arrows pointing to things, and I covered my entire wall of this stuff. Yes. I mean, I thought at first I was like, oh, this is overboard, but it actually helped me because being able to see even like code snippets, I'll take an entire little program and I'll write the code, or I'll take definitions, or I'll take drawings and I'll put it up on my wall so I can see it every single day. And seeing that, even without thinking about it, it how do I say it? I absorb it without thinking about it. And so maybe if you're listening, that's a little tip if you're having trouble trying to visualize these concepts. But do you have any more tips or advice that would help, I guess, people who learn like this?
Yeah, so for visual learners, absolutely. So don't be afraid to go through the material in a non-linear fashion. So if you want to jump around, if you want to jump to the summary first, don't feel guilty, don't feel bad. It's totally normal and totally okay to process the material however you like. If anything, it may be of help to you to find headings, find subheadings first. Look at those first before you go through the material to give yourself a gist. give yourself a sort of an overview, a big picture of what you're about to process. It's just going to help when you drill down into the parts. It's going to be much easier, I think. Think of exactly what you did, Felicia, metaphors. So try and find real world scenarios where you can link these very abstract concepts to. That's great. And if you do have the ability to draw or create flowcharts, is an excellent way to do to be more visual. Even using like Excel spreadsheets where you've got tables and you can see like each of the methods or something like that. That's all really great visual ways of studying. And I will say that we also, at least for me, learn by a practice. So just if you are doing an interview, for example, practice lots and lots of different types of problems. So it's not enough to just do one and then you just understand it. We think of in a very global way, so many different types, and you'll be able to solve problems much quicker. And you'll be able to also find, that's another thing, is to find the relationships between different concepts. So if you've understood something like function execution context and it comes up later on, for example, this, you could then do flowcharts and then link them up. You find your job, I think, as a visual learner and where your strengths are is in finding relationships and how things connect to each other.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's hard in the beginning when you start a course and you're just bombarded with all these different types of concepts. It's how do these all work together? What is the main idea here? How are they used together? That's what I'm struggling with right now. I understand now, I guess, execution context and this and objects and stuff, but I'm still having trouble thinking like, how does this all work in the real world? How does this all work in a program or for a project? And I mean, I guess I'll find out later in the course, because there's a written assessment and then there is a project afterwards. And so the answer to my question will probably be answered there when I have to do a project. But yeah, that's so helpful for people. I hope people listening to this take something away, because if something's not working out for you, it doesn't mean you're a bad learner or a bad student or anything like that. You just have to find other ways to make learning easier for yourself. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I do believe that. And for a long time, I did think that way. Typically, classes in general are not really taught for a visual learner. And so I don't mean launch school, I just mean in general. So I will say that just because that you learn differently or you have a different style of learning, it doesn't mean that you can't learn and really master, really understand the material. If anything, you may comprehend it on an even greater level, because at least for me, when I was first learning JavaScript, it wasn't necessarily enough to learn the fundamentals and of the how and the what of each element. I also wanted to learn why. Why does JavaScript exist in general? And so I did a lot of history. I went and I looked up the history of JavaScript and what happened in the 90s and why is it so quirky? You know, it made me appreciate JavaScript more, and I didn't feel so like I had a more antagonistic relationship with it. I wanted to be able to enjoy it. So I found out why it was so different from every other general language. Yeah.
Wow. Have you found that leaning on your skills or talents as a designer has helped you to study and be a better programmer?
And that's not just a designer. So for anybody that's had a previous profession in something or has studied something prior to programming, those soft skills will transfer big time. So things like communication, being able to work in a team, being able to problem solve, that's all in every other previous study or previous profession. That's all transferable. So yeah, and same with me being a designer, particularly problem solving and getting creative and coming up with interesting ways to have more expressive code or readable code. Yeah, definitely.
Right, because I've seen you code before, and I was blown away just how differently it was written. I thought, wow, I would never solve a problem in this way. I think you used reduce. And I've kind of always been a little afraid of reduce for some reason. And so seeing you use it in the way that you did just blew my mind. I thought, wow, that's such a cool way to solve a problem. And
Thank you.
yeah, I thought it was super creative. And not a lot of people, I guess, think software engineering or programming could be a creative field. There's so many ways to solve a problem. I mean, we see it all the time, like in the exercises side on Launch School. You have the little comments part at the bottom where people can post their solutions. You can just go through that and see hundreds of ways of solving just one problem in one language. And
Yes.
that is such a cool thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. And especially such dynamic languages like Ruby and JavaScript, there's so many ways to solve and write a problem in those particular languages. There's so many ways, and it allows you to be really expressive and creative in that regard. It allows you to problem solve, and you could use, for example, a for loop, or you can use an iterative method, or you could use just, there's so many things that you could do, and it just allows you to be, I think, is very creative. Actually, in the Australian copyright law, programming falls under the category of literacy. So it's like you're a writer, and you're given the same copyright infringements as you would a piece of code compared to if you're writing creatively. So I don't think it's any different. I think that when you write a piece of code and when you're problem solving, it is very creative. It's a very creative field.
Yeah, I agree. And knowing that how many ways to solve a problem, that's helped me and prevented me from falling into the trap thinking that, oh, my solution is weird, it's wrong, nobody does it this way, which I used to think when I first started solving problems. And I had a hard time because I would look at the Launch School solution and I would think that's the only way to solve it. And if I couldn't understand their solution, I felt so bad for myself because I just didn't know. But over time and from talking with other people, I've learned that is just one way to do it. Launch School's way of doing it, and here's everyone else's. And that's why they give you space and say, if your solution is different than ours, post it here, maybe explain it a little bit. And that's happened a bunch of times where I, for the life of me, just couldn't understand Launch School solutions. And I would look for someone else's and find the one that made the most sense to me. And I would stick to that solution. I would write out what they wrote out, try to break down the problem and try to get into their head and think, what were they thinking when they solved this? I don't know if you remember that problem, the what century is that? Or when century is this problem? That problem was a nightmare for me when I first started. It was so hard. And I spent so many days just trying to get it. And yeah, Launch School solution didn't work for me. So I found someone else's solution that made sense. I actually took that solution, wrote their name down, and I on that brown piece of paper, I put their solution on the wall right in front of my computer. So I saw it every single day. And I was like, I will understand this solution and this problem. But
that is excellent. Yeah, no, that is the way that you do it. I could completely understand. And Launch School's way of the actual interface of showing how Launch School does it and then inviting other people to share how they did it too is brilliant, because it not only exposes you to Launch School's way, and then you're exposed to so many different ways to solve that problem, and it just allows you to become more you'll be like, oh, I'll remember that next time. There's this other way to do it. And you just increase your vocabulary. Right. And you're sort of like, if I was an artist, you'd have more colors to paint with, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way of thinking about it. And also too, I just thought about this. You will have to know how to read other people's code, whether, I don't know how it actually works, but say you're sitting in front of someone else's computer and you're looking at their program, you're going to have to try to understand what they're doing. So it's good to be exposed of all these different ways of coding, because if you only just see how you do things, but you never see anyone else's code, you're going to be really confused, because there'll probably be keywords or like syntax things that this person writes that you don't. And so you're going to think, I didn't learn that, or I've never seen that, when it is part of the language. And it is a valid, correct way of writing it. You just haven't been exposed to it. And so that's really going to Launch School's part for allowing us to share solutions and exposing us to lots of different ways to write code. So
I know for
So,
myself, I don't know if it was the same for you, but when I first started launch school, I was so excited. I was just like, yes, I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And so I went with this excitement through 109. So Ruby 101 and Ruby 109. And by the end of it, I had like burnt out, as in my excitement was just gone. And I just thought, oh my gosh, there's so much more ahead of me. And I have only just finished the first course, but they always say the first one is the hardest. So I
oh
didn't feel
yeah.
too bad. But then after that, I was like, well, now that I don't have any excitement, how am I going to propel myself? Because this is a self-paced course. How am I going to keep pushing myself to keep going through this material? And I will say that excitement starts off really to be your propeller, but then afterwards, you have to find something more sustainable to keep you going. There has to be something else, some other reason why you're here other than I'm just excited to be here. It can work for some people, but for me, I did burn out pretty fast. And so finding your style of learning is such a game changer. I remember when I hit JavaScript, the fundamentals, I took a month off to find out I need to figure out another way because whatever I'm doing is not working. And I spent a lot of time researching about different styles of learning. And that's where I found the visual learner and how they learn. So I'm really, really excited to be able to share just some of the stuff that I picked up and that has helped me do very well in assessments and understand the material.
That is something that we kind of all struggle with is how do you stay motivated? How do you keep, how do you, I guess, how do you endure through the long process and keep it interesting and keep it exciting, even when you're not motivated, even when you just don't feel like doing it? Like how do you do it?
Yeah, no, definitely. They give you the learning how to learn course at the very beginning, and that's excellent. And it did definitely help me throughout the beginning. And even the book on mastery by Leonard Cohen, great book. So many interesting ideas and things that I never ever thought about come to light, and learning about endurance and preservation and how to commit to something even when it's hard and even when you've practiced it so many times. So that was a great book. Can't recommend that one enough. But for somebody like me, and as I said before, you have many different types of learners, and logical, linear learners will breeze through the material and find it very easy to pick up because it's structured in a bottom-up approach. Launch School is taught from parts to global. But some people learn global to parts where they need the gist. And in that case, I was struggling. I was like, why isn't this working? And then so somewhere through JavaScript, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to take some time off to try and understand what's going on because I'm struggling more than I thought. And there was other people advancing that were at the same time as I was, but were advancing much quicker. And I didn't know, was it me? Or was it the material, or was something was up? So, yeah.
Wow, I have that same experience all the time. People that I study with are just suddenly zooming faster, quicker than I am. So what? How? I mean, I don't think. I mean, I know I'm a slow learner, but I didn't think that I was that slow. So what is it with me that I'm not able to understand the material at a relatively, I guess, efficient pace? I don't want to say rush or anything, because I never try to rush, but I do try to be efficient with my learning. I'm so happy that we're talking about this because now I'm realizing that I'm probably a visual learner too, because I have the same exact struggles with context and trying to get a general sense of what's covered before I go into details. And I didn't think that was a thing. I thought it was just me, just struggling on my own, I guess. But I didn't realize that someone else had that same
Yeah,
issue.
no, it's very important to, and it's not a well-known thing actually, but there is a spectrum. There's a spectrum of the logical linear people who are predominantly more left-brained, and then there's the more spatial, the more creative. There's the more out of order, non-linear, that's more right-brained, and there's a spectrum where people sit anywhere on that line between the two. And you could be a visual learner, you could be a more logical left brain maths learner, you could be a more a kinetic learner that needs stuff. You could be a spatial learner where you need to you understand how things fit in a room really well. There's so many different types of learning, and I do encourage you that if you are struggling with any material that feels very unnatural, to find material. There's lots of material out there on the internet that will tell you what you do best, and then play to your strengths.
That's such good advice. That's not really advice that I hear that often, actually. I guess that's really a really good thing for how law school is structured and set up, is that you can really take your time. And if you have the time, you're given time and space to figure this out about yourself. It's not like college or university where everyone's on the same exact schedule. The semesters are the same length for everybody. So whether or not you can catch up and understand, it doesn't matter, because the semester ends in December and that's it. That's not really fair, because for a lot of people, they don't learn the material, they don't understand it. And so like what's the point? You're paying money and you're spending time to do something you're not fully learning. But with law school, you're given that time, you're given that space to really to grow and to learn about yourself as much as you're learning about programming, which is huge, which I think is so important and really awesome, I think. I'm so excited to hear this because it's so helpful already.
I know when I found out this stuff, I was like, oh, this brings me so much comfort that I'm not slow or weird, or there's something wrong with me or something, that I just learn differently, and it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm so excited. I hope people listening are taking this advice, because that's what I was actually struggling with today. I was like, man, there's just something I am not doing correctly, because this information is just not sinking in. And maybe I just need to draw a picture or something, and that might just be it. So yeah.
I mean, you and I, we need to see it in front of us. We need to see the whole thing and all it's connected up. We need to see it, and then we know. Then it's like, okay, I understand. But seeing things in parts, I can't put it all together in my head. And so I'll have to bring it out and then put it on global space, like put it out like on your wall. In my case, like I have a big canvas on Photoshop or on Illustrator. You could do whatever you like, and then just have all the information on one page. So I can zoom in into different areas and be like, yeah, that's how that relationship comes together. Yeah.
That is so cool. This is so exciting. What do you hope to do after you're done with law school?
So I would love to be able to do capstone. So the only thing that it's a bit of a question mark for me, is the time zone. So I would be basically working night shift or studying night shift. So I'd be studying during the night and then sleeping during the day. So I would have to turn my clock around for a few months, but I think it is worth it. I think I do want to be able to pursue capstone. Capstone in launch school is the student launching project to give you that employment for the type of jobs that launch school wants their students to get. And these are great jobs, and I would love to be a part of that, and also learn what it's like to work in a team, learn what it's like to do just-in-time learning, which is be able to learn on the fly new ideas just for that particular project. So I'm looking forward to that. That sounds exciting. But after that, I don't really know what will come of that. I imagine that capstone would teach me a lot of things that I would then understand, like, oh, this is the type of software engineer that I want to be, or but I don't quite know exactly. I just know that I want to be in this industry. Yeah.
Same. Totally agree. I asked myself that question too, like, what exactly will I be doing? And the answer is honestly, I have no idea. I want to do capstone, but after that, it's just so open. And that's another really cool thing about, I guess, the software engineering field in general, because sure, I mean, there might be some anxiety about not exactly knowing what you're going to be doing, but at the same time, that's kind of exciting, because you don't know what you're going to be doing, and you could be doing anything really. And most likely you're going to enjoy doing what you're doing. You're going to be really, really good at it. And so that's the exciting thing about the software engineering field, because there's just hundreds of directions you could go in, and some that you're probably not even aware of until you get closer and closer to that part. And so be very open-minded.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because this particular industry changes so frequently as
technology
grows. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think we were talking about it before, but we came from the architecture field, and I love architecture. I still love it so much, and I wonder, can I somehow go back to that with my software engineering skills? Would I be able to apply, say, to an architecture firm or a construction science firm, or can I do something in that field? Who knows? And if not, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll find something that still makes me really happy.
I definitely also would love to be able to do something very flexible. So it would be great if I could work remote. I do love the flexibility with this industry, is that you don't always have to have a 9-to-5 job. You can tailor it, or you can work some days in and some days off, and or 100% remote altogether. So I do love that. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I would love to be remote. I kind of like just making my schedule, or just being home to work. I've gotten so used to it with launch school that it's gonna be hard for me to imagine myself sitting at a desk, having to go somewhere and work for once. It's been so long. So I've gotten really comfortable with being home and working.
Me too.
So do you have any advice for people who are transitioning from a new career into the software engineering field, and maybe they have some anxiety about it, or they just need encouragement to jump into and just go for it?
Sure. I will say that I did have some concerns for me. I consider myself an older student in the sense that I've studied twice. I've had a few degrees prior to this, and I thought, oh no, studying again, and just the question mark, like, should I? But I think you mentioned this, Felicia, that it's much better to be able to choose something that you're passionate about, or trying something different, and just seeing, you realize what you don't want. And I do encourage people to test it out. So if something like Code Academy or other free related, or a free code camp where you can test out, or even Launch School's introduction, which is completely free, test it out and see what you think before you make that commitment. I know Launch School actually talks about this, the exploratory phase, which is, and they show this diagram of you should play and explore with programming first to see if it's right for you. If you like it, but I do encourage to then get into it, but then, and just know that there will be struggles, and there'll be times where you think, oh no, is this right for me? But
Yeah.
it, like, as I was mentioning before, depending on your style of learning, it will vary. But you can definitely do it. And to try not to let age be a deterrent. It's better than being in a job that you don't enjoy, or because you spend most of your life in a job, especially a full-time job, 40+ hours a week, and it's better spent doing something that you enjoy. Try not to let age be a deterrent, or if you've got some other commitment like full-time work, try and see if you can do something part-time. But the transition, especially during the pandemic, I think people have made it easier for you to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I agree. I had so much anxiety moving into this field, because not just because I loved architecture, but because I had spent so much time and money in studying that. I had a degree already. I was working on a second degree, and any other person would think, why didn't you just finish? Why did you just completely jump ship and go to something else? And it's, well,
Yeah.
I had a few reasons. I had to. Financially, I just couldn't afford to. And honestly, I was just struggling so much in school, and I love architecture, but I didn't really enjoy going to architecture school. And there's a difference. I don't know. It's just one of those things where I just didn't want to be miserable, or didn't want to end up in a job that I wasn't fully happy in. And, who knows? I haven't gone to the job part of software engineering yet, so I'm not sure totally how I feel, but so far going through law school, I've loved it so much. I love the community. I've seen personally what I could do I guess in terms of my abilities, I mean, I didn't know that I could code. I didn't know that I could understand these really complex concepts. And now that I'm learning all these things and I'm improving and improving, like it makes me more and more excited to be here. I wouldn't be experiencing all these really cool and awesome things if it weren't for me taking that huge step. It is scary, and I was able to. You know, if you're able to, if you have the chance, if you're thinking about it, I would say, like just what you said, test it out, do the prep course, do a free code camp, code academy, whatever you can find. And you're just testing to see if it's even remotely interesting to you. Don't ever feel that you are stuck in one spot in your life and you have to be there. You don't have to be there, I guess, if you don't want to. And if you have the chance to do something else, then totally go for it, because you don't want to be like 80 years old thinking about your life and being filled with regret, like, oh, I should have done that. Hopefully you can find something that you enjoy, whatever it is, and go for that, because that's the majority of your time on earth is going to be spent working in that field. So yeah, that's such good advice.
And I will reiterate what I mentioned before, which was that any profession, any previous study is all transferable skills. So you may think that you're studying again, but in many ways you're not. So it's not like you're fresh out of high school and you haven't learned any life experience. Life experience is so transferable, particularly things like communication, which is like the #1 thing in this industry. So and something that I would stress and that I had issues with is that you don't have to be a math whiz. So I always thought that programmers had to be really into tech, or they love math, or they're really, really good at it. And I wasn't, but that's not the case at all. You need basic understanding, but it's not in what you think.
Right. Yeah, that's the question I get a lot is, I think, or I see software engineering being this type of field, or I see this type of person mainly. Is it what it's really like? And the answer is no. There's lots of different people in this field with varying degrees of like knowledge and proficiency, and you don't have to come in, like you said, being a math whiz. I mean, I was terrible at math, just terrible. And the last person on planet Earth that would ever try to become an engineer, because I was just garbage at computers in architecture school, like 3D design and mock-ups. Just don't ask me to do it, because my brain was like, I'm just going to draw this with a pen and pencil and be done. Like, don't ask me to draw on the computer, because I cannot do it. And so for me to like sit here and code full time and actually understand what I'm doing, just mind blowing. So,
isn't it awesome? It's one of the best feelings in the world, and it just makes you realize, like, wow, I can actually do anything if I put my mind to it.
Exactly. Like, don't just think because you might be bad at something, maybe you actually aren't that bad at it. You just have to learn in a different way or something like that. I mean, you could always learn, you could always improve. You have the time.
You do have the time. You have the time to work out what kind of learner you are. And even if you don't work that out, you just have time, period. The best thing, which is also kind of the most challenging thing, is that it's self-paced. So sometimes you don't always know when to press start the assessment or begin the interview. Because you're not sure. But having people around you where they're like, no, you're ready, do it. This is the time, that's going to help you as well understand. But having that time has been so invaluable. So invaluable.
Right. I know what you mean. This with people telling you. That's kind of the sign that I've taken now when I'm ready to take the assessment, is when I've studied with enough people and then they start saying to me without any prompting, oh, you're ready, you got to take this. I'm like, oh, okay. If other people can see that, I probably am ready. Because in my head, I will never be ready. I guess my last question is, do you have any hobbies? Any cool hobbies? Yeah.
Yes. Well, as you may have already guessed, I love personal development. I love being able to, I love books, and anything to do with improving your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual states, anything. So anything that will make you a better student or a better professional. That's probably why I did all that research about what kind of learner you are and that sort of thing. It's just great. And I love as well, so in conjunction with Launch School, I read lots of textbooks that are about JavaScript and Ruby, and just to get a different take on it. I do love to read. I also enjoy cooking. Cooking is fun. Actually, I think because of Launch School, I am a better cook because I can now open my pantry and think, oh, I have these 3 items. How am I going to make this meal?
That's so cool. It's like seeping into different parts of your life.
I will say that Launch School has also made me a better graphic designer as well. I do some graphic design on the side, and I'm just able to, again, come up with working solutions. It's very similar process to solving a problem, if not the same. So those are all things that I do in my spare time.
Interesting. I have the same kind of experience, not with cooking, but just in other parts of my life, because now I have this whole mastery-based mindset in my head. It's how do I apply this mindset to other things? And I wanted to learn how to speak other languages, and there was something else I wanted to
Awesome.
learn. I think like crocheting or sewing.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like I don't want to know, just how to sew basically. I want to know like the history of it all. I want to learn any other skill that I have to mastery if I can.
Once you get over those difficult humps of not understanding something, and when you finally do, you then get used to facing lots of obstacles.
Right.
And when you do that, you then realize that you can actually like have a love for learning in general, or just anything.
You get used to almost in a way, not failing, but you're allowed to stumble and make mistakes and fall at times, but you know now that you can get back up and do better and improve, which in the beginning, as soon as I made a mistake, as soon as I failed something, I just had a meltdown. I couldn't handle it. And now it's like you learn how to take criticism, you're taught ways to improve, and after a few times you're like, oh, it just slides right off your shoulder. It's not a big deal anymore. And it does make you hungry to learn new things because you feel empowered. You feel like no matter how much I struggle, no matter how much I mess up, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to keep learning and keep growing. And you just want to learn as much as you possibly can. I hope you guys liked hearing about Karis's journey to and through law school. She's so awesome and super talented. And I remember reading one of her articles. I think you were trying to explain like the PDOC process with the left and right brain. And I read that months ago and I thought, this is amazing. Like, this is exactly how I learn and things like that. And I didn't realize that it was you who wrote it. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm talking to the lady herself who wrote this amazing article. So yeah, I'll link it so you guys can read it. It's really incredible. That was such a cool article. Thanks for writing it.
Thank you. Another article, or rather a comic that a lot of people have mentioned that has helped them with networking foundations is my Medium article on a very basic explanation on how the internet works. A lot of people have commented on that, saying that it has helped them, and some teachers are like, I'll use this in my curriculum now, and it's been really great. I've been very overwhelmed because it was just an assignment. It was just an optional assignment, and I just thought, why not make it fun with pictures? If anybody, that's part of the Launch School. It's an example that Launch School links to as well. So that's also out there too, if you are interested.
Okay, I'll link that one too. I'm pretty sure it's just as amazing. I'm gonna have to check that out because yeah, the internet, putting that all together, super confusing. So I'm gonna go give that a read. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again for doing this. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to her journey as much as I did. So see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye.